Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and a story out of the UK is stirring up some serious conversation. Member of Parliament Chris Coughlin was denied Holy Communion after voicing support for assisted dying legislation, something the church obviously firmly disagrees and teaches against. His reaction, though? Outrage, which, okay. But the priest's actions have actually ignited both praise and backlash. And joining us once again is Will Anselm, someone who's been keeping a close eye on the story and offering some solid commentary on it. Based in the UK, and brings some faithful and thoughtful lens to the moments just like this. But good afternoon to you, Will. But thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me again. It's good to be back. It's been a while, Keith.
Absolutely. So, Will, for the listeners that might be unfamiliar with this story, could you maybe summarize what happened between Chris Coughlin, this member of parliament, and his parish priest?
Yeah, of course. So Chris Coughlin, who is a Liberal Democrat MP for Dorking and Hawley, was denied the Holy Communion by Father Ian Vane at his parish church in Surrey while voting after having voted in support of a bill to legalize euthanasia under the so-called terminally ill adults end of life bill, which is the biggest doublespeak ever. Now, his priest wrote to him in advance, privately, indicating that under the law of the church, he, as the minister of communion, is bound to withhold the Eucharist from him if he were to go forward and vote in favor of something that the church has repeatedly condemned. He did so anyway. He voted for the bill, and he was withheld communion. And the priest, Father Ian Vane, addressed this publicly in church at Mass, indicating that it was his responsibility as a custodian of the sacraments. And Chris Coughlin decided to take to social media to express his disdain, and what he has to say is quite interesting, to put it one way.
Yeah, seriously, to say the least. Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because I probably would have never have known about this if he hadn't gone on to Twitter to essentially complain about this and try to stir up the nest, so to speak. But it's really interesting too, because like the church's teaching on euthanasia and assisted dying is pretty black and white. So I'm curious, why do you think so many Catholics, especially in the public life, in this example, this member of parliament, seem maybe unaware or so dismissive of it?
I think that in the case of this guy, in the case of Chris Coughlin, one of his subsequent responses was very telling. He spoke of having been raised as a Catholic, hashtag I went to Catholic school. How many times do we hear this? Then sort of wasn't really properly catechized. His family left the church. And then around when he was 18, 19, came back. And he describes himself as being an partially agnostic Catholic, sometimes being okay with what the church teaches and sometimes going my own way. So I think therein lies, for this chap in particular, his problem, that it's obviously very clear to him that we heard from you guys across the pond during the election cycle, that brilliant phrase from one of your bishops, cafeteria Catholic. We call them pick and mix papists here in the UK. But I don't think that he's aware of this valuable document, which was written by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in 2002, specifically dealing with the role of Catholics in public life, especially if they are part of legislative bodies. And matters of life and the defense of life are very clearly indicated as being non-negotiable. War, taxes, a whole raft of them, much more liberty and freedom in terms of the exercise of conscience, depending upon the particular measure. But it says very clearly, and it's affirmed by Pope Benedict XVI, by Pope St. John Paul II, the last four pontiffs have maintained the position that there is no defense, no appeal to the exercise of conscience, no defense to political strategy, no defense to anything that will permit a Catholic in public life to vote in favor of euthanasia or abortion without there being censure or canonical discipline or pastoral recourse, right? So it's very clear, but it seems as though this chap is Catholic when he wants to be. That's perhaps the fairest way of putting it. But hopefully, maybe the best thing that can come out of this situation is that he starts going to catechism class.
Yeah. Well, and thankfully there's people like you out there that are pushing back and more like a respectful tone. I think that's one thing that you've been doing really well. Because I know there's a lot of people out there that are essentially going after him in a non-charitable manner, which is unfortunate. But I can understand the like, come on,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Well, so how do we actually? Let me take a step back. Going back to the actual parish priest. You mentioned that he took him aside. Was it like in a private discussion, or was this
I
during
believe he
like the
wrote to
mass?
him. So beforehand, he wrote to him before the vote took place, and I believe that he spoke. I think that he addressed the Mr. Coughlin from the pulpit. Now, this is the only
Oh,
component of the story, I believe, which might have benefited from a little bit of a different position. The relationship between the priest and the communicant in these circumstances probably is first and foremost private. And the prelude to Chris Coughlin making this public probably started with the priest making it public. And as I said in a tweet in response to Mr. Coughlin, people would be very surprised at the number of occasions when people, laypersons, are taken aside privately by their priests and told, I'm not going to commune you until
mhm.
you deal with this particular issue. And they do so, right? These measures are curative. It gets out of hand, however, when it is made public. And the fruit of it being made public is that every man and his dog is now aware of this and weighing in on it in both directions. But I'm most surprisingly, the only people who are sort of speaking in his defense are, surprise, surprise, Anglican
Ah,
Anglicans, both in America and in the UK. But I think when it comes to dealing with it sensitively, I start with the position that every disciplinary measure that the church employs is always curative. It is always a cure to an injury within our souls. We don't take people aside and give them a death pill. We don't take them aside and burn them at the stake for these kinds of things. Anybody who has been excommunicated or has been denied the Eucharist, the way to come home and to be put right and get right with God is there in the sacraments. So it's always
mhm.
curative. And I think we have to start from the position that that is one Catholic who is not receiving the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is a sad, shameful thing. And what needs to happen in order to rectify that so that he can return into the fullness of the church. That is the starting point, I think, in how we approach this with grace, with mercy, and so that we don't impede this restorative measure that the church has implemented, you see.
Mm, well said. So you live in the UK. I'm
Yeah.
curious, how is the culture there when it comes to life issues and how they're treated by Catholics in politics?
Well, certainly when it comes to it's been interesting looking at the euthanasia debate because it's been the number of doctors, the number of clinicians, the number of atheists, people across the board have come out in opposition to it. It's been very interesting to see on the question of euthanasia. There has been much more pushback than Catholics might have expected. For us, on just looking at another issue, the abortion issue, I mean, abortion has just been decriminalized in certain instances by the back door using this current, everybody's focusing on the euthanasia bill. And therefore, in the middle of all of this, under cover of night, they very sadly pushed forward some reforms to abortion. But
Mm,
abortion is never an election issue. 97% of abortions that take place here in the UK are done so through the exploitation of a loophole in medical law, a risk to the mental or physical health of the mother. This is signed off on by two doctors who in many instances have not even seen the mother. So broadly speaking, abortion is not something on people's minds as much as it ought to be, apart from for us as Catholics. The euthanasia thing is fascinating in terms of the turnout against it, which is far more significant than many of us were expecting.
interesting. Wow. So what would I mean, I guess what should we do when we find ourselves maybe confused or scandalized by stories like this? Should we just like step away and just pray for them? Should we maybe engage in conversation online, charitably? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that as the lawyers say, he's opened the door for it. Nobody would have known about this if he had just kept stum and gone to confession and fulfilled his penance, or had dealt with it Alternatively, let's hope it's not the other way and he leaves the church or whatever that might be. But he opened the door for it. And I think that I always use the example, especially talking with young people and new Catholics. Imagine that Christ is proofreading, or our Blessed Mother is proofreading your tweets, or Blessed Carlo. Remember that Blessed Carlo Acutis has got admin privileges on every social media platform. There's nothing that you can hide. So I think always remembering that's such a brilliant and important place to start, because yes, it's a divisive issue. Yes, but it's not even a divisive issue for us as Catholics. That's such politics speak. It's a very clear-cut issue. What do you want us to say? But the most important thing is always remembering that the church has done something. Christ has intervened in this situation, in this error that this gentleman has made. And we must always be mindful that it is not for us as laypersons to opine, to interfere, to frustrate potentially, and potentially nullify that curative measure. So the most important thing always is to remember the church has done something about it. Give praise and thanks for that, how wonderful it is. But also at the same time, remember that this is the beginning, hopefully, of a curative process for this guy, you know.
Yeah. Well, hey, for those out there listening, if you want to follow more of Will's thoughts and reflections, make sure to find him on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Will. Well, we'll just put it in the show notes there for you. It's Will Anselm and then the letter E. It's always difficult to like read people's screen names out loud, but we'll make sure to have those in the show notes. But that is it for the remainder of Morning Joy for a moment here. I might add that the conversation does continue online with our roundtable. Just search Morning Joy Radio or GRN online on any of your favorite social media platforms to join us there. It's going to be a great time. And once again, it's always kind of the extension of the conversation because we have so many time limits here on the radio. But hey, for those that are staying to listen to the Holy Mass coming up next, please keep us in your prayers as we continue to keep you and your intentions in ours, and always keep our leaders in our prayers, especially those who are voting against life and against Catholic teaching. They need our prayers more than ever before. But if this is us truly parting ways, God bless. Make it a joyful Wednesday. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.